Two friends meet up to drink some beers and talk about past times. Not yesterday, but long ago, it's scandals, wars and crimes. From Stalin's reign to Prohibition, Tudors, Pompey, Bush and NASA's mission, Edison's Bulk, Genghis Khan's rise to victory. Forget your old teacher, it's time for Pint-Sized History.
Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Pint-Sized History, the history podcast where we walk you through the landmark events in the past that shaped the world we lived in today. I'm Zach.
And I'm Joe.
And thank you all for joining us. We're here for another episode. We just come out of Vietnam, and we're heading to something completely different today.
We sure are, Zach. We sure are. I thought let's do something a bit different, a bit niche for this episode, and there's this mystery that has been on my mind for quite a while. And I thought, fuck it, let's just do something complete. Let's go off the rails and have like a really fun chat about something that's completely different from the usual war type events that we're used to doing, basically. So for this episode, we'll be doing DB Cooper, the mystery.
So if you're not watching the visual podcast on YouTube, Joe has just put some sunglasses on. And these are sunglasses that Joe wears all the fucking time. And they're so reflective. so if you have a look at him, it's like looking in a mirror. But you look great. You got
hey, thanks, man. Well, they're not staying on. I'm just doing this for effect. But they will be coming off now. But anyway, point being, this is one of America's most famous, or at least one of their most iconic mysteries that to this day has never been solved. And it's a fascinating tale, and we'll be diving right into it. Firstly, before we do though, don't we have a sponsor?
Oh, what a great time to mention that we're both drinking Crate Brewery's beers, and I'm having a lovely hazy pale ale, and that just tastes astounding. Joe, what have you got in your hand?
Well, I have a Crate Brewery pint glass, which they have given us. They gave both of us them, but for some reason Zach's not using his. He's preferring to drink out of the can.
Like a filthy commoner.
I'm respectful to our overlords, Crate. So I'd like to thank you. I actually don't know if I've got a lager or... Let's just have a quick check. I've got a lager. What a surprise. Thank you very much, Crate. How, if you wanted a discount code to get their...
Really interesting.
How would you do
thought.
How would you do that?
Let me think. Oh yeah, go to the website. Go buy a crate, get a beer. Pint size 15, PINTSSNED 15. Get 15% off all Crate beers. Now, back to DB Cooper, Joe.
Oh, now, Zach.
Who is DB Cooper?
That's a good question. Let's start by asking, how much do you know about DB Cooper?
I know nothing.
Literally nothing?
In general, in life.
Okay, well, that's true, of course. But in terms of this specific moment right now?
Yeah, I know nothing Jon Snow.
Nothing Jon Snow whatsoever about DB Cooper.
No.
Wow, well, that is truly
But now
exciting.
I know what he looks like, because I can see behind you there's a picture of him. So.
Presumably. Allegedly. Let's find out.
What are the biggest mysteries in the world besides DB Cooper?
Well, I think in terms of, like, you know, famous, I think Jack the Ripper's easily one of the most iconic because, you know, he's been known for over 200 years, almost 200 years at this point. Never found out who he was. Obviously, lots of suspects. Very famous. I mean, it's one of the things associated with our country. So, you know, I'd say he's up there. I'm sure if we could rattle off a few more.
Area 51?
Area 50. Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly
Bigfoot. The Loch Ness Monster.
I mean, that's more of a conspiracy theory. Same with Loch Ness.
Aliens. A mystery.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in extraterrestrial life. Mm-hmm. Didn't say that very clearly.
Well, let me put it a different way then. This is certainly one of the most famous and iconic crimes that was committed, and it happened in 1971. So
9/11's a mystery, sorry.
9/11's not a mystery.
Jet fuel can't melt steel
That's
beams.
a conspiracy theory. They're different. That's not a mystery.
It's a mystery of life, Joe.
That's a conspiracy. You're getting them very muddled right now. That's worrying.
No, I think I've understood this concept perfectly.
That's extremely worrying. But no, so this is easily one of the most famous crimes that was committed, and to this day they still don't know who it is and whether the person is alive, really. So, shall we get started?
Is it recent?
No, I just said 1971.
Okay, sorry.
So, almost 50
years. As usual,
years.
not listening.
No, that's, in fact, over 50 years. 54 years, sorry.
Yeah.
The date is the 24th of November, 1971. A man dressed in a dark business suit with a white shirt and a stylish thin black tie buys a one-way plane ticket to Seattle. He's carrying a black suitcase in his right hand and is given the name Dan Cooper on his boarding pass. Okay.
Nice name.
Lovely name.
Yeah.
He gets on board of this flight, this is in the afternoon, and sits right at the back of the plane. He's in the middle seat of, I think, the right-hand aisle of the plane, literally right at the back. He's in a Boeing 727, which is a fairly small aircraft. Apparently, there's a few crew, 5-6 crew, including the captain.
Fantastic aircraft manufacturer as well. rarely does something go wrong on a Boeing plane.
Yeah, I know. And maybe about like 30, 40 people, like passengers, other passengers on board. In this middle seat, right at the back, he lights up a cigarette and he orders himself a bourbon and 7-Up.
Sounds nice.
Quite the
7-Up's
combo.
my favourite soft drink.
Yeah, you know, this guy smoking, having a whiskey and a nice bit of lemonade in his suit.
It's like a Mad Men scene.
It is very dramatic, isn't it? It's very, you can see it in your mind. And it's at this moment, about 5 minutes into this flight to Seattle, which bear in mind is only a half-an-hour flight from Portland to Seattle, where they're going. He beckons to the stewardess, the flight attendant behind him. She comes on over, leans over, and he hands her a note.
I do know this.
Go on,
I
then.
don't. I don't know anything about it, but I do. I've heard this. I don't know what the note says. Continue.
Go on. What does the note say?
It says, "There's a bomb in my suitcase or something. Don't move," or something like that. Or
Yeah,
don't make a scene.
You're fairly close. The note literally writes, "Miss, I have a bomb in my briefcase, and I want you to sit down next to me." So, pretty much exactly that. The flight attendant, Florence Schaffner, she reads the note, sits down next to him, and asks quietly, because she doesn't want to freak out anyone, if she can see the bomb. So he lifts up the suitcase.
Can I see it? Can I see that big
Let me see
bomb
that
of
big
yours?
bomb. Opens it up, and apparently there are what seems to be 8 sticks of dynamite attached to a detonator button, you know, a device, basically. It looks fairly legit. Of course, she is, her and I think the other flight attendant are the only ones that actually see it. So there's always he could have been bluffing, but no one else sees us, so we really don't know.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons I hate air travel. Yeah.
What, bombs?
Just the threats of air travel, you know, because anything goes wrong, and if that plane goes down, you're just immediately dead. You know, there's no second chance in a plane crash. Although it did happen in Korea, didn't it? With Canada, where it turned over on the runway and they all survived.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Not every plane crash is fatal. I think
but
actually less than you might think
I don't like the
are
thought.
fatal. But yeah, it's a pretty brutal way to go. That's why it's so scary, the thought of it.
Thanks, Joe. You really comforted me.
Well, you know, are you taking any flights anytime soon?
Yes.
Ah, well then, fuck you. You're dead. Sorry.
What the fuck, man?
I don't know.
Who'd you do this podcast with? If I was gone.
There's a few candidates.
Oh, fuck off.
No, I'm joking.
You thought about it. That is insulting. I haven't given a second thought to it.
In fact, let me just show you my list of names.
Kieran Gallagher, our friend.
Right, so, oh my god, bomb, plane,
Very Al-Qaeda.
Al-Qaeda?
Very Al-Qaeda coded.
Yeah, well, look, it's the 1970s, right? So obviously this is a very different time. Firstly, he's been able to walk onto a plane, a domestic flight, in fairness, but walk onto a plane with
They
a
don't have
suitcase.
the scanners.
They haven't checked it at all. They haven't looked inside the suitcase.
Them were the good
going
days.
through.
Smoking on the
he's
plane.
smoking. Yeah, 1970s, man.
Not taking 100 milliliters of toothpaste.
You're right. If you think about the time period, it's a pretty, fun time. I mean, it's 1970s, thick of Vietnam, which is, what we were discussing in the previous episode, is right in the thick of it. Obviously would have taken a big portion of the time. No one's thinking about air travel. Apparently, this type of aircraft is one that was actually used in covert missions over Vietnam, which
really?
led people to believe later on that maybe the reason they chose this aircraft was because they were a military man, maybe served in Vietnam and had used this as a test before, so they knew what it would be like, decided to use this specific aircraft. Man had recently landed on the moon. Nixon was in charge. The Beatles had broken up. Arsenal had beaten Liverpool in the FA Cup final in 1971, so it was all happening.
Yeah.
A beautiful time.
You really did a lot in the 70s, didn't you? Oh, sorry,
did
no,
you.
that was Liverpool.
We did do a lot in the 70s.
Yeah?
That
What'd
was
you
one
win?
of our best.
What'd you win?
Well, we won the league.
Yeah, we won 3 European Cups.
We won the league.
We had 3 European Cups
We
in
actually
the
won the
70s.
league double in 1971, this year of the story. And it was the first time or the second time that the league double had ever been done in the history of English football at that point. So fairly important stuff. And obviously in Dan
Intriguing.
Cooper's mind, he's thinking about, man, that Arsenal team truly were brilliant. Thank God they beat that
I think
Liverpool scum.
I think he was thinking Bill Shankly, Bob Paisley, Kenny Dalglish.
I don't
That's what
think
you're
Bill
thinking.
Shankly was the manager. I did actually have a quick look at
Of
the
course.
final. Or was it Bob Paisley? It was one of them.
You know,
I can't remember.
people debate who the greatest manager of Liverpool is of all time, and it's always Bob Paisley and Bill Shankly.
There weren't many players I looked from either team that I looked at and recognised. I think your goalkeeper was Ray Clements.
Ray Clements, yeah, I do remember him, yeah.
But anyway.
All round the fields of Anfield Road. I just got my season ticket, so I'm really happy.
So the note is in all capitals, felt tip pen, saying I've got a bomb. I would like you to sit next to me. She sits next to him. And what do you think happens next in this story?
He goes, put your hand in my trousers and start jerking.
I'm just going to let that one simmer for a moment. Let everyone really think about what he's just said.
Alfie's, I got a valedictory laugh there by
Producer's
Alfie.
laughing in the other, and he knows how fucked up that is as well. You're cooked, mate. You're actually cooked.
Yeah, I've attracted quite a bit of heat on TikTok as well for being misogynistic.
Have you?
Yeah, because of I don't know if you saw.
Oh yeah, I do.
On the Anne Boleyn execution video, that I was genuinely intrigued by what would happen to Anne Boleyn after she got executed, because someone said the ladies in waiting had to wait with her, and I was like, oh, what would have happened? And people were like, that's facetious and ignorant of you. How dare you say that? And I was just like, I've just asked a genuine question. I don't want to talk about misogyny, which does exist.
Yeah, that was quite something. That comment's got like thousands of likes, basically calling you a pig. But because you're using the misogynistic pig, but because you're using the
misogynistic pig there.
Yeah, but because you're using the pint-sized history name, like, it basically means that they don't know if it's you or if it's me or if it was poor Troy, who's the only person whose face is really evident in that video. And so
it was Troy. Troy has the details to the account.
It's like a blanket misogynistic pig calling out that they've gone because they don't know who it is that is writing for us. So I thank you for
all
that.
men are pigs.
So what I wanted you to actually say there, Zach, was the next part of the story is the demands. Why would you have a bomb on a plane unless you wanted something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's demanding. And what are those demands? Have a guess.
The hand job.
Not the hand job, no. Nice try. So he wanted 200,000 American dollars.
Okay.
He wanted...
Which today is...
Good question. So in today's money, that is roughly around 1.5 million American dollars, so probably around 1.1 million pounds.
Unmarked bills.
In $20 bills, in fact, he actually specifically asked for American currency, which is a bit odd, since he's in America. It's not like they're going to give him anything else.
Yeah, they might give him euros or something.
No,
is euros on
around Seattle?
Yet? No,
they're not there. Come on, they're not doing that. I think that's pretty fairly bait. I mean, especially if he just said dollars, doesn't he?
I think the Eurozone was 1972 anyway, so we couldn't ask for any euros.
Okay. Anyway,
he asked for some great British sterlings, though.
Yeah, but he didn't. And so instead he asked for 200,000 American dollars, and he asked for 4 parachutes, 2 sets of parachutes essentially, and a fuel truck that would be waiting at their destination, which is Seattle International Airport. Now, the total journey only takes around 30 minutes from Portland to Seattle. So once they are close, the plane is essentially put into a holding pattern above the city for 90 minutes while they gather the fuel truck, the money, and the parachutes.
The passengers must know something's up at this point, right?
That's good. Another good question. The passengers know nothing.
Really?
Or most of them don't. Apparently, by the time...
ignorant Americans.
I'm not sure that's true.
Sorry, American viewers. You catch strays every single episode.
I don't think that's fair. I think it's actually more of a credit to the flight attendants and basically all the crew from not panicking or showing anything that might indicate that there was a problem. In fact, apparently by the time they left an hour and a half later after this holding pattern, many of them had no idea that they were involved in a hijacking. Only found out later. So I think that is actually quite impressive, in all honesty.
Credit to the man too, as well, for not arousing suspicion.
Well, I think
DB.
that's I mean, that's what he wants.
DB, down bad.
I mean,
Just wants the hand job.
it is a bit odd that there would be a flight attendant sat down next to him the entire time, but he is right at the back. It's not like many people are going to be looking at him. Also, apparently, early on in the flight, he starts putting on the sunglasses, and he does not keep them. He doesn't take them off for the rest of the time that he's there. So he's got these sunnies on. He's got these sunnies available. He's looking cool for the rest of the time.
His visibility is really restricted, though.
Lights. Boeing 727s, notorious for their lights.
Absolutely.
And
their doors which don't stay on.
Sure. And really?
Yeah, that's the whole thing. Like,
what, in the specifically 727 or Boeing?
Boeing.
Right. Okay.
Should I say, or you're ignoring that point?
I just don't care.
You literally looked away. You couldn't give a fuck, could you?
It's not
what
relevant. It's not relevant to the story, man.
Looking for new podcast partners.
I'm sorry.
Moving on from my
There's
questions.
a bomb on this plane, Zach. Jesus Christ, we need to get the money and we need it now. So, 10,000 notes, $20 bills, 10,000 of them are brought on in a big rucksack. They're collected from...
Must be a really big rucksack.
You'd imagine so, with 10,000. They're in like these little... Well, I was about to say they were in rubber banded, bits, but of course they would be. How else would they be?
Yeah.
So ignore that. They were collected from a local bank.
Which bank?
Oh, I don't know, some bank in Seattle, man.
Do your research, man. Fucking hell.
It's written down somewhere, but fuck if I know or care. So anyway, at this point, Tina Mucklow, who is the other flight attendant that spends most of the time with Dan Cooper, apparently she actually spends the vast majority of the time with him. Apart from the very beginning, she's basically the one that sits down next to him, has the in-flight phone at the back, next to her, and she is constantly the relay of communication between him and the pilot, and and then the pilot to whatever authorities on the ground. So basically, she's the one that spends the most time with this person.
Good chit chat.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine she was very young. I imagine it was quite a traumatic ordeal for her, not knowing if she was going to get blown up at any moment. This was happening for hours. Remember, it's the holding pattern for 90 minutes. And then once they're actually on the ground, there's a problem with the fuel truck. So it actually takes around 2 hours on the ground before they then take off into the skies again.
Oh, so that was the plan, to go down, get the parachutes.
That's why he asked for the fuel truck. It was so that he could refuel.
Oh, okay, cool.
So
he's really thought this through, hasn't he?
Well, that's what it seems, doesn't it? It seems like this guy is really on it.
So what are they doing on the ground? Like, what are the authorities doing this time?
They're pretty much collecting the money, the money, the parachutes, the fuel truck, and they're bringing it as quick as they can. At this point in America and worldwide, the concept of not negotiating with terrorists wasn't really a thing.
Yeah, you're right.
It's not. It only becomes a thing later and later. And actually, this case study is actually a pretty good example of why you shouldn't do it. Because what happens is that when this becomes global news, especially American news, a lot of pretenders try to do the exact same thing. They go, well, if it worked for him, I bet I can do this too. And so there's a bunch of very similar hijackings of planes in the 70s
because
of D.B. Cooper.
Wow.
So I think
and they all get their way.
No, most of them get caught very, very quickly. So for this is but the fact that it's happening and they're having to give away this money and stuff is troublesome. So they eventually realize, okay, we need to change our tactic when it comes to this type of hijacking.
Yeah, don't negotiate terrorists. Munich, 1972.
Tina Mucklow, the other stewardess that I just mentioned, she actually goes off the aircraft and takes the rucksack and the parachutes, brings them back on board. At this point, it's only the pilots, I think one other crew member and her. So 4 of them and D.B. Cooper that are left in the plane at this point. They stay there on the ground for, like I say, 2 hours until the fuel is ready to go. And it's at this point that Cooper gives his instructions for the next part. Now, what he asks, in fact, what he demands, is for them to fly to New Mexico. Now, Seattle, which is right at the top of America, if you're not sure, it's at the border with Canada on the west coast, to Mexico City is a huge flight.
Wait, so New Mexico or Mexico?
No, Mexico City.
Because New Mexico's a state.
Did I say New Mexico?
Yeah.
Sorry, I meant Mexico City.
Did you? Yes, you did.
I don't know. I'm
Jesus Christ, man.
I'm riffing, man. Let me riff.
So to Mexico.
To Mexico
City.
In fact, to be fair, I don't know. There's a lot of details here. Maybe it's New Mexico. It's not really important because they never make it there. So that's actually so. But
wow.
And part of the reason for that is that this small aircraft is not meant to do that type of flight anyway.
Yeah.
On top of that, he gives some very specific instructions. Firstly, the plane cannot fly above 10,000 feet. The staircase at the back of the plane needs to be kept open the entire time. They need to have the flaps on and the wheels down. Now, those are some pretty bad conditions to fly in. There's some pretty tough conditions for the pilot to deal with, and it would increase fuel consumption by a lot. So, regardless of how far they have to fly, they're fully aware that this is not acceptable. How would they ever be able to do this? So, the pilot says to him, look, we can't do that. What we could do is we could fly to a different city. I don't know, like Phoenix or somewhere in Arizona, somewhere in California, somewhere, and refuel. They basically debate which places to go. A few different places shouted out.
DB, Cooper, and the pilots.
Yeah, Sacramento is one of them. Shouted out a few different ideas.
Where is Sacramento?
California, I think.
Yeah.
But before they eventually decide on Reno, which is in the state of
Reno, California, Utah, Nevada.
Well done. Third time lucky. Reno, Nevada is where they
Las
agree.
Vegas.
Near Las Vegas, sure. I actually don't know how close it is.
Probably
to Las
not
Vegas.
very close.
Big-
Las Vegas is like
big state.
mostly desert, isn't it?
So Nevada is. It's a very deserty
Yeah,
state.
sorry, I mean Nevada, yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently in Las Vegas, like, you can reach the end of the strip and then you're just like, there's just desert behind you, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is kind of strange.
It is, yeah.
Considering it's such like a popular tourist destination.
I think it's part of the charm of it, though, is the fact that it's, it's kind of
haven
in the
middle of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. It's in the middle of nowhere, and suddenly these bright neon lights.
Your
Yeah,
sins will never
Sin
be
City.
found in this
Exactly,
desert paradise.
Honestly, I think kind
Yeah.
of, yeah. It kind
quite
of
good,
gives
quite
that
good.
charm.
Yeah.
You want to go?
Maybe
That's
I
what you're
should-
saying.
yeah.
You want to gamble?
Pint-Sized History from the casino from the
wanna
blackjack
gamble?
table in Las Vegas.
Would you like us to go to Las Vegas and do a episode there in a casino room?
Go to our Patreon.
5
Pay
minutes
for us
in.
to go to Las Vegas.
5 minutes in, and we're just like talking about some historical thing. Sorry, can you leave? This is a casino. Sorry, I thought this was America.
This is America.
What the hell, man? So they start this flight now. Seattle to Reno is still a 3-hour flight, so pretty big. one thing that I mentioned very briefly a second ago, but I'll explain in more detail now, is that this specific Boeing 727 has a very interesting design in its staircase. It basically has a rickety old staircase that goes down from the very back of the plane. Now, if you're watching the visual podcast right now, I'll put a version of it up. You know, if you're flying in the air and there's like a staircase that's like kind of heading down, it's kind of scary. It's, you know, there'd be windy
as in it's coming from the door.
Yeah, it's like
out, just out into the sky.
Okay, imagine you're in the middle seat of your aircraft right now, where DB Cooper is, right? You're sat in the middle bit of the back row. Literally, right behind where you are is how you open
an open door.
To open it down to the, and it's literally just like a few steps down, and then obviously it would be the ground if you were landed, but in this scenario, it's in the air.
Oh, okay, fine. I see. Mm-hmm. It's like a tiny staircase. It's like a private jet staircase.
Kind of, yeah, exactly. That's attached
you
to
pull
it.
open the hatch and it comes down.
Exactly, that type of thing. And so they take off into the air, and it's at this moment, maybe, I don't know, 5 minutes into the flight. Remember, there's only about 4 of them on board, that Cooper turns to Mucklow, the flight attendant, and he says to her, right, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to open the staircase for me. I'd like you to then walk into the cockpit. And so she goes, okay, and she starts to open it, and she's like, hold on, because it starts like billowing out wind.
Yeah, because of pressure.
Very scary. Also, something I haven't really mentioned, by this point it's the evening, so it's very dark, and it's a very rainy night as well. Really rainy, quite stormy. And so she tries to open it, and it's just jolts and wind. She goes, can you tie me to something? This is terrifying. I don't want to do this. And he goes, no, it's okay. I'll do it myself. Just show me how, and then head into the cockpit. So she shows him how. She then goes to him, could you at least take the bomb with you? And he goes, don't worry. I'll either disable it or I'll take it with me. And then she walks past the thing, and as she turns round one final time to close the drapes, she sees him attaching the rucksack full of money to himself, implying that he's going to jump. Then she opens the door to the cockpit, closes the door behind her, and then for the next 3 hours, they spend in this cockpit until they reach Reno. They open the cockpit on the other side and slowly walk into the cabin, and there's no one there.
Whew. That's so cool. That's so like Mission Impossible. It's like Tom Cruise.
It's pretty insane, right?
Wow. So he's gone. And I presume the mystery is that no one's ever found or heard or knows who he is, and it's an unsolvable crime.
Well, in theory, there should be lots of ways to solve it.
Sorry, you're not talking.
Well, you're not talking. This is a podcast.
You said
I don't know if you know, but this is a podcast.
You said something like you're about to say something more. And in theory, there should be a lot of ways to keep going.
Well, I was waiting for you, mate.
There should be a lot of ways to solve it. Such as...
So, no DB Cooper, no bomb, 2 parachutes gone. What's happened?
Well, he's clearly jumped out of the plane.
Has he?
Yes.
Okay.
Or what I was thinking as well is he waited for the plane to land, and when they were in the cockpit, he scurried off the back because the stairs were already down. Or jumped a little bit earlier, maybe.
In theory, he could have jumped off when the plane was on the ground. However, there were 2 fighter jets following them the entire way from Seattle to Reno. And I presume not only were they landing at the same time, but once they're actually in the airport, there will be cameras everywhere. It's the FBI are all over this. They've been all over it for 5 hours at this point. So I doubt...
Oh, no, not the FBI.
The FBI are pretty, they're pretty dangerous, man.
They're shit.
They're not shit.
They're a waste of time, the FBI.
They're really not.
They don't do anything.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not basing that off anything.
You've
I've got no idea where that thought's come from.
Clue what you're talking about. I think it's fairly safe to say he did not jump off the aircraft once it was already landed, because I think the chance of him surviving getting out of the airport, for starters, would have been almost nigh impossible. So let's dispel that. So what does that mean? That means that he must have...
jumped out in the dark, rainy night
right.
to avoid the sight of the fighter jets seeing him jump out.
Yep. So what do you do then? If you're the FBI, what do you do?
Well, you plot a radius of exactly where he jumped out,
right.
but you don't know because he was in the cockpit for 3 hours.
Yes, that's good. So now you said that, I can give you the next piece of information. So at one point during this, I'm treating this like an investigation, man. I'm trying to,
Detective Davis.
Detective Davis, exactly.
At your service.
Yes, you're absolutely right. That would be triangulating where exactly you think he could be. A search area is paramount to this investigation. You're spot on there. So I'm going to tell you something that's quite interesting. So after Mucklow goes into the cabin, I'm not sure what it is exactly, maybe 10, 20 minutes or so, the red light goes on the cockpit, on one of the red lights on the dashboard. And it basically indicates that the staircase has been lowered. So at that moment, the pilot buzzes in and goes, Is there anything we can help you with? Do you need any assistance? And this is the last words anyone ever hears from Cooper is no. So they know that time that message has been sent. About 5 minutes later, there is a jolt in the aircraft. Where suddenly,
how small is the aircraft, by the way?
Well, imagine 40 passengers on board, one long cabin, there's 6
you could
crew.
feel someone jumping, using it as a jumping
Well,
pad.
this guy is carrying parachutes, a shit ton of money, and is on a rickety staircase. It's very tumultuous anyway, the flight. Remember, it's very rainy, very stormy, dark. Apparently, they're basically at cloud level or just above it.
Cold. Very cold.
Very cold, November. So, yeah, he jumps.
I mean more being at cloud level rather than November.
He jumps, presumably he jumps, and in that moment, there's a jolt in the aircraft, and the pilot has to quickly, address it and just steady it out until it continues on. So from that, they can kind of safely presume that that's probably the point that he jumped. And so that now they know the minute, because they know roughly when that moment happened.
They know wind speed.
They know the speed of the aircraft. They do know roughly, the conditions that he's out in. One thing that's really interesting. Now, you mentioned earlier how he seemed to be really prepared. One thing that proves that surely he is really well prepared is he asked for 2 sets of parachutes. Now, you didn't really jump on that when I mentioned it the first time. The reason why that's interesting is because that, in theory, implies that he's taking a hostage. Now, people think that the reason that he wanted to take a hostage but didn't was that he actually just wanted to give enough excuse for the FBI or whatever authorities are in charge to not tamper with his own parachute. Apparently, when they got the demand, one of the first things they said to themselves was, well, let's cut the parachute or just tamper it so it doesn't open. And they're like, well, hold on though. If there's 2 sets, then he might be taking a hostage. We can't do that. It implies that he was very, very prepared about what he was going to do. At the flip side, though, and this is the weird thing, he was very, very impatient, didn't seem to care where this drop fuel station would be. So where he wants to go to Mexico or New Mexico, wherever it is, and they say, no, you can't do that. He then goes, I don't care. Take us anywhere.
Well, that's because he knows his plan is to jump anywhere.
Right. But if you were to take a flight to somewhere in Arizona or Nevada or somewhere in California, that is going to change where your plane is going to start going. The point I'm making is when he jumps out of this plane, from the area they think he's in, it's a huge forest, snowy. Apparently, this forest is the type of forest that people can just go missing and their remains never found. Mm. He is not wearing any gear that prepares him for this type of jump. He's wearing a suit. I think he has a trench coat.
He looks great when he's doing it.
He looks sick. He's got sunglasses on, even though it's fucking middle of the night. He's looking hella cool. But
great for the jump, though, sunglasses.
I'm sure he took those off or put them in his pocket or something for the actual jump itself. But most importantly, these are not the conditions to survive in the middle of a snowy forest, in the middle of the night, in November, with no civilization and the whole country looking for you, essentially. So, in theory, all these things basically mean that he was incredibly planned out, but at the same time, it seemed in a way like he was more just like winging it at this point. He just goes, we've been taking too long. We've been sat on the ground refueling in Seattle for 2 hours at this point. I don't care. Get us in the air. Apparently, the pilot says, well, can I plan out a flight path? And he goes, just do any. I don't care. Just get us on the road. So he clearly doesn't care that much. So the pilot chooses a specific flight path, and that's what the FBI ends up using.
I think that's what makes it so cool. It's like the raucousness of it, like the callousness of I'll figure out as I go along. I'll get on this plane. And I think I do know something about this.
Okay.
That the dynamite turns out to not be real, or something like that. So he comes on and he has this briefcase which hasn't got dynamite. He's like, they'll believe it. I'll come on. I'll pretend to hold someone hostage. I'll get them to drop there, refuel there, get a couple parachutes. Mm-hmm. Then at some point I'll just drop out. I think that's what makes it a really enchanting story.
I mean, it is, isn't it?
And it feels like anyone could do it. And that's why you said it spawned copycats.
Yeah,
it's probably because people are thinking, oh my God, this is so simple.
And he looked cool as well, didn't it?
He looked great. He had sunglasses and a suit.
And exactly. And if you're looking at the visual podcast, you'll see that one of the many sketches that the FBI created and sent out to the public. Now, apparently they had a ton of these that they got from eyewitness from especially the flight attendants that had the most contact with him. And all these, they have a bunch of them, but they all look relatively similar. And these would have been in the news. So, if you were in the 70s and you saw this guy in a suit with those sunglasses on, you go, man, that could have been me. I quite fancy a piece of this. I'm going to give this a go.
He's got quite a nice face.
Yeah. He's very 70s, isn't it?
I like his nose.
Very, very retro.
He's got a really sharp nose, yeah.
Well, that's presuming this looks anything like him.
Yeah. Nice lips, too, for kissing, of course.
Okay. All right. So, what else are you thinking, Zach? Come on, you're a detective. You've been thinking, okay, so search the area. I can tell you right now that the big area that they end up searching is not only difficult anyway, because it's a huge forest, you can get lost in very easily, but it's
Mountain
freezing
lions?
cold. Sure, bears, I think,
Bears,
much more
bears,
likely.
that's the thing, yeah.
But remember, it's freezing cold. And apparently the weather is awful, so it makes, searching ground to a halt. So, and initially, barely anything. No, nothing. No. Also, another thing that's really important, and one thing I was wondering if you were going to say was the evidence. There must have been some evidence left on the plane, right? Fingerprints or something?
No,
right?
I wouldn't have thought that.
Oh.
Fingerprints in the 70s.
You're never getting hired as a detective. If you ever go for a detective's job, I'm going to send them this podcast episode and go like, don't hire him. You don't know what you're doing.
I've been thinking it's quite a lucrative career being a policeman these days. I think you get paid quite well to become a policeman, and it'd be a pretty fun job.
Call me policeman, I like it.
Yeah, that's a Stasi, basically.
Would you like to know what other evidence is on the flight?
Yes, please.
Okay, so there's not much. You said a second ago that the bomb you thought that might have been proved to be fake. He takes it with him. It does not leave on the plane, so that evidence is gone. We never see the bomb again. So we have no idea if that bomb was real or not. He takes everything, almost everything. The only things that he leaves behind are the one set of parachute that he doesn't take with him. His clip-on tie, takes it off, apparently. So the tie is there.
A clip-on tie?
Clip-on
Oh,
tie.
that's not very mysterious.
No,
That's silly.
No.
If you're gonna hijack a plane, at least have a proper tie that you've tied yourself.
You're kind of cool.
Oh,
You're just like,
clip-on.
you're about to jump. You
Oh,
just
and throw it off.
That's kind of cool. And the final thing, 8 cigarette butts.
Oh, so they have his DNA.
Yes. But then they lose it.
Oh,
Yeah, I know. Which then makes the question.
sorry, did I not say the FBI were incompetent?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that is pretty fucking poor. That is really bad. Like that, because I don't know if they would have been able to tell anything from it at that time, but it certainly would have been hella useful in the years leading.
Yeah.
So that's really.
You know the
really
9/11
cool.
hijackers. The FBI knew information on them. They had details about the 9/11 hijackers.
I did know that. Yeah.
Before the thing happened,
they
they
didn't- they
didn't
weren't-
press them.
but they weren't
And
pressing.
they were bait as well. The 9/11
Yeah.
hijackers. They were like all staying in.
That's part of the tragedy of it. Was that no, they didn't,
so avoidable.
they ignored so many signs.
Yeah.
Me leading up to it.
Any suitcase he might have taken on the plane. Do you
He
have
had his suitcase.
do you
That
have
was the
hand
bomb.
luggage and like
Yeah, the
and-
suitcase, that was the
and
bomb.
something in the hold as well?
No, that was it.
You don't have hold
It was his
luggage?
person. The one thing I
His
guess
seat. His seat. Fibers of his clothing on the seat.
I'm afraid nothing. No evidence whatsoever. There is the boarding pass. There is the boarding pass. So you do see his name, Dan Cooper. So that is, you technically see his handwriting.
Do you have to have your passport to get?
Not in a domestic flight in America.
You don't need a correct name. You could do any name for the
Well, I'm
boarding
sure
pass.
now, since then, they've made it, you had to prove that you were Dan Cooper before you got on
Yeah.
the flight. But back then, in 1971, he could just write it and that was it.
Oh, you wrote it down.
He just wrote down on his on the boarding pass that he paid from the place and said Dan
Some
Cooper.
computers, aren't there? I guess.
No. Well, maybe some very early tech, but yeah, nothing that could be able to discern anything from 1971.
Did he order anything on the
Yeah,
plane?
he had a bourbon
and
Seven
Sprite.
Up. I'll
Yep.
look, but I'll stop you from going down the evidence route. On the plane, there is basically nothing.
Okay.
Like I said, the parachutes, which obviously wouldn't
Okay, so
touch.
CCTV from the airport, from back, his journey into the airport, or
No.
him walking through the airport.
No, none of that.
Cab drivers take him to the airport.
I'm sure they looked into that, but didn't find anything about
Anyone he might have spoken
Would you
to-
give your name in a random cab? Normally, just get in a cab and you go to the airport, please.
Taxi.
Yeah, I'm sure they did interview any taxi
JFK
drivers
airport.
on that day, but no, nothing to do with that. I like the thinking though, but no, none of that.
Who was sitting next to him on the plane? No one.
No one,
No
except
one.
for the flight attendant, Tina Mucklow.
I don't know. I'm at a loss, Joe.
Okay, no, that's fair enough. Well, look, you're not a detective, so I don't know why I would think so highly of you. But I'll tell you now, this is number one thing that I think you're missing, and that is the money.
The money.
He's gone with $200,000. Now, money has serial numbers. So, in theory, one thing that you could wait for is to wait for the money to be spent, right?
Okay.
Otherwise, what's the point in getting the ransom if you're not going to spend it? They even do things such as put out the serial numbers of the money and say, if you see, check your bills, check your notes, see
Check your
if
bills.
you have any of these serial numbers. Because if you
Who's
do,
doing that?
you might have. Well, they were giving rewards. They actually gave, I think it was a huge reward if you could find some sort of some part of the ransom and bring it in. They were really, they interviewed thousands of people, thousands of suspects. They really went heavy on this because that's a lot of money. And it was the first one that was successful in theory of its kind. You would expect that money to be spent somewhere. It was never found. However, 9 years after the hijacking, the first money was found from that event.
The first money.
The first money, is that all right? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
the first money?
The first money?
The first
bill.
The first part of the money was found
Yeah.
in 1980 by an 8-year-old.
Oh, really? Where?
So
Nevada.
9 years after the hijacking took place, an 8-year-old kid called Brian Ingram, is with his parents.
Very Jewish name. Ingram.
Is it?
Yeah.
Near Portland, by a river. I'm not sure if they're camping or picnicking or something like that. But he's with his family. He's an 8-year-old, and he starts digging in the sand. And he digs in the sand, and out of nowhere, he finds 3 bundles of cash.
Oh.
All attached together, but separate bundles of cash, all in the same spot, underneath the sand. And the parents, when they see this, when he brings it to them, think, "Oh, I wonder if this is the Cooper stuff, because it's a huge story.
Yeah.
It's it's in the area." So they immediately inform the FBI. The FBI take it, and they absolutely confirm that it is some of the money from that ransom. 9 years after.
Crazy.
Now,
in Portland,
to this day, that is the only money that has been found.
That
54 years on.
So he's from Portland.
So he
Clearly.
flew from Portland to Seattle, which is both, if you're not aware where they both are, they're both in the state of Washington. So, Portland is just a bit further down the state. So he's literally flown from, which is in the very, very top left corner of America. Except, well, I guess not including Alaska.
Alaska, yeah.
But yeah, in terms of like on the border with Canada,
Good
it's
old
at the very top
Soviet
left.
territory.
And so, roughly from where he jumped out, in terms of the triangulation of where they presume he must have jumped out, flying down to Reno, would have been around Portland.
So he was only in there for like 20 minutes on that.
Yeah, he
return
jumped
flight.
out after about 20 minutes, and then for the next 2 hours, 40 minutes, they're just there on their own on the way to Reno. So, what does that imply?
Well, it implies that he is in the Portland area, or has at least gone back there to bury some goods because it's somewhere he frequents often.
Okay, yeah, that's more like it. So that there's two things.
Fucking good at this shit.
Remember, this is by a river. It's in the sand. So there's always the chance that it fell out of him while he was parachuting. There's always the chance that he
in the perfect bundles though.
Yeah, well, that
under the
there
sand.
You go. Now you're fucking thinking like
yeah,
this.
maybe
Thank
not.
you.
Maybe not.
Well,
actually.
I
think dug perfectly with spade.
It was it's very fair to just assume that the river, it might have flown down the river, because it's not near where he jumped. Let's be clear, but it is in that area next to a river. So it could have been that it landed in a river and then floated down until eventually got to that point and landed on the beach.
It was so wet, right?
What they found out, and this is one of the most interesting parts for me, is that apparently they did a test 30 years later with the rubber bands that are used for this specific amount of cash. And apparently these rubber bands, after 1 year of exposure to the elements or to water, would have broken. Really? 9 years and it did not break.
Can't work.
Which implies that if it didn't break and it stayed in the sand, then someone must have put it there.
Jesus.
Was it him, or was it someone else that stumbled across the money because it had fallen out of him during the paratroop, or did they find his dead body? Now, one thing you haven't mentioned throughout this is, did he survive?
Very, very true. But where's the rest of the money then?
Exactly. If there's no money, then it implies...
God, I'm getting great at this. My head's clearing. The seas are parting. They're clouding my brain.
If there's no money that's been found up to this point, then there's 2 options, right? Either he has been really careful about spending it, or more likely it is in the forest in the middle of nowhere and he didn't survive the jump. Let's be real. I mean, genuinely think about this. Skydiving is not an easy thing to do. Paratrooping, there's plenty of stories of paratroopers that died during World War II, for like Band of Brothers when we watched it. Obviously, usually they've been shot out of the sky, but if you think about it,
Lieutenant Meehan's
if you remember in the first episode of Band of Brothers, there is a guy that just lands in a tree and he can't get out. He's stuck and he just dies in the tree. And this was a case. This would happen. Where,
but he's also not got 20 kilos worth of gear on.
He was but he had heavy stuff, and these are big trees. But look, my point is more just being, these are really, really dangerous conditions to skydive in. I mean, literally, you're literally jumping out of the middle of the night. You can't see what's below you. It's stormy, it's rainy.
His aura will guide him.
You'd hope they were. I mean, he is seriously aura farming. Yeah. I mean, my God, the guy's got like sunglasses on going,
aura farming?
Give me a bourbon. Give me a bourbon and 7-Up, and let me just light the cig before I blow this plane. For the last 10 minutes, I'm just going to talk a bit about what they thought could have happened. So there are obviously a bunch of different ways they could have thought it could have gone. They thought that he could have died. Now, I personally, if you were to genuinely ask,
you think he's died?
I think it's most likely that he died because it's extreme. Remember, he's not equipped for these conditions anyway. He's got literally his suit, a trench coat, and his suitcase has a bomb. It doesn't have food, doesn't have equipment. He's in the middle of a forest. One interesting thing about these parachutes, apparently the ones they gave him are not steerable. So wherever the wind, wherever
it's just a drop.
It's just a drop. So wherever the wind takes you, it's taking you. You can't do anything about it. So, you know, from his perspective, I think it's quite unlikely for him to survive this specific scenario. However, because of the fact that no one found anything about it, and this is also quite important, no one filed a missing persons report. Now, often, if someone's died from a stunt like this, you're going to presume, because he knows what he's doing, he's planned it out, he's clearly a man that knows things, he's probably part of society, he may not have much family, but he probably has a job somewhere to have all this that he's able to bring to this. So,
how conscious of that was 1970s America, though? Like, if he didn't have a family, or wasn't like homeless or something without family, they're like, who there's going to be like, oh, I haven't seen him in a while. Maybe
general,
maybe I should file a missing persons report.
1970 isn't that long ago. It's
but the world's changed a fucking lot since then.
It has, but missing persons reports is a pretty good way of being able to determine, because, you know, it's like they've got good details. They know he's in his middle-aged, mid-40s, I think, roughly, or late 30s.
So it's the biggest midlife crisis ever.
Yeah, basically. And another thing that's interesting is that apparently he had a grudge. Now, apparently he said to the stewardess, she asked, like, why us? Why would you choose us? Yeah. And he kind of laughs and goes like, it's not your airline that I have a grudge with, it's that I have a grudge with someone.
That's cold.
And then it is cold. Brr. Whew, November. And not only that, but he then goes like, this aircraft was just at the right place at the right time. That's what he said. Yeah. Now, could we trust his words? Does he tell the truth? We don't know. That's another thing to point out. But
how did he talk? What accent does he have?
They could not discern a accent.
Right place, right time.
Very generic American. But interestingly, and I'm glad you brought that up, interestingly, and at the beginning, the search was for Americans. You presume he's American. However, there was a French comic about a Canadian pilot called Dan Cooper who would jump out of airplanes. Now, this comic was never brought to America, and it was never translated outside of French, into English. However, it was brought to Canada.
Oh.
And obviously, many Canadians might be bilingual.
Yeah, Quebecois.
Exactly. Technically, it's not on the French-speaking side, but more importantly, it made them realise this could be a Canadian. We can't actually just assume he's American. There's a very decent chance he's Canadian as well. So, it broadens their search out even further. Now, if he did survive this jump, which I think it was unlikely, at the end of the day, none of the money was spent that they know of, and no body was found. And it is a huge forest. They searched for ages, and it was only 9 years ago, in 2016, that the FBI closed the case completely. So they're no longer searching for this guy. It's now just fans, that want to be the person that figured out the case that are still looking. But the government has given up on this because it's been so long.
Just sounds like a trip, man. Sounds like a fever dream.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Bear in mind, all these pretenders that tried to do a very similar thing were all caught. Well, not all caught, but the vast majority of them. This was a thing that was like, they followed very similar methods, landed in similar places, often survived. Apparently, a lot of these people that would land in similar areas, big wooded forests in cold conditions, would survive. It's not out of the realms possibility that he could as well. But they were all caught within a day or two or a week.
Really?
Yeah, that's how difficult it is to get back to society without anyone noticing, and to last. And very interestingly, and we haven't spoken about the suspects at all, because there were thousands, and there are some that still to this day people debate whether it could have been them. Apparently, several men on their deathbeds have gone to their wife, to their brother, gone, I have something to tell you.
Aura farming.
It was me. Serious aura farming. At their death, on their deathbed, they got to aura farm some more. And it was many. So obviously, they can't all have been.
That's not only do you because you're obviously lying. It's not only do you just what meaningless last words to have to your family. But
some of them had good alibis. Some of them had, looked similar, were the same age around that time.
You look a bit like DB
worked in paratrooping. Well, if you think I'm not going to do this, I'm also going to say on my deathbed, it was me. It was me all along. I went out in broad daylight on a podcast and told the story, even though it was me all along.
No,
I look nothing like. I'm sorry. I look
got a very similar nose and eyes, actually. Maybe. No, you don't.
Yeah, I don't look at all.
Because he's a good-looking man, and what I got from over sitting across from me, not a good-looking man.
Alfie, can we cut off his mic? I'll do a monologue for the rest of this. My man's not wearing. He's wearing the nicest.
My man.
He's wearing the nicest dress shoes. He's wearing a trench coat. He's wearing he's taken off his tie, but he's in a shirt. I personally think that it's very unlikely that he survived this. But the fact that we don't have the proof means you can't help but talk about whether he did and whether he was able to integrate himself into society.
Or just go to Canada.
Yeah, although I'm
Did
sure
they cooperate with the
Well,
Canadian?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm sure they completely cooperated with it.
My optimistic fairy tale ending is that he completely survived. He integrated harmlessly back into society and lived silently with the secret, knowing that he was DB Cooper all this time and no one knew about it. And I think
Presuming he's mid-40s in
quite low-key.
1971, he would be close to 100 at this point, so he's likely dead.
I feel like he was so chilled and casual with it that surely that gives credence to the idea that he did survive, because he's like trained in doing it, former pilot, maybe former paratrooper,
Right.
has this understanding, knows how to get himself out, probably with that very good survival skills.
Yeah.
So
if he was part of the military, that would have helped him, right?
Yeah. So, and maybe he wasn't dependent on, maybe it was like a thrill thing. Maybe he didn't need to spend the money. He may have had a military pension, so he may not needed to spend his money.
Well, a lot of the suspects that were big on the FBI's list were there because they had recently been, and literally that year or so, had been let go by a plane industry or the government or a military thing.
That's so narrow.
They thought,
that's so like niche.
well, I'm not. That wasn't. Look, they looked for over 1,000 people. I'm not saying that was it, but they were high on the list because you were thinking it is odd. This is a weird crime to commit, or not just that he has a grudge, but more that he would specifically target this plane at this time.
What if that's, a bluff? A bluff, I've got a grudge to try and lead you away.
But
And guess what it is? Sucked up loads of FBI resources because they're
Absolutely.
incompetent as shit.
Again, you keep going with this incompetent thing. I'm really not sure if that's true, mate. Really not sure if that's true.
Well, from what I've heard today, they're incompetent as fuck.
This is all I've got. It's a fairly simple, short podcast that we had for this evening. I want to do something completely different. And for me, this is a fascinating mystery of someone that completely went against the odds and seemed, in one way, extremely well prepared, but at the same time, very, rushy, leap of faith type stuff. Goes, fuck it. I genuinely imagine, I know it's very difficult, but when, if you're looking at the visual podcast, you will have seen what I mean about the staircase. Imagine you're flying through the air and you're standing on this rickety staircase that's barely... Apparently, the wind was gushing so hard that the placard, one of the little cards that's attached to the staircase saying, like, danger, be careful and stuff like that, ripped off it, and they found it years later, like, on the ground, pretty much where the flight path would have been. So this, this would have been a pretty terrifying thing. You presume that he's paratrooped a lot, but we don't know. So, you're standing on this thing attached to these paratroops that you don't know if they've tampered with at all. Parachutes, I keep saying troops. The parachutes, you don't know if they've been tampered with at all. You've got the money next to you and you're worried the money might fall off at any point. You're not prepared for how freezing cold it is, how windy it is, how the rain is in your face. You cannot see, it's a blind jump. You can't see anything below you. You're literally just looking at darkness, and you just go with this kind of, here we go, and you jump into the night sky. And for that reason, I just think it's a really fascinating
isn't it? Yeah.
mystery, and one that has not been solved to this day. And if I had to guess, I reckon it might one day. I reckon either more money will have been found, because his body, if it did get caught in a tree or eaten or something, will have deteriorated. There's no doubt. But the money will be there. If he did die in that forest, that money will be there. The money that was stashed away, which is obviously one of the most interesting parts that 8-year-old boy found, that might not have been found by him. That might have been found by someone that was walking across, thought, oh, nice. Money, $5,000 or whatever it was, picks it up, goes, I heard about this story recently about the hijacking. It might be from that.
Too hot.
I'm just going to hide this and come back to it later. And maybe did. And then, but because of how much of a story it was, because of how he was like, oh shit, I actually can't spend this, then he just left it there for years and years to come until eventually someone else found it. We'll never know.
Is there any really leading outstanding?
Pretty much every suspect that was heavily suspected.
There's no Kuzminski here.
Well, even to be fair, like Kuzminski was from Jack the Ripper, and I do get why you're saying that. No, what I'd argue is that all these suspects, similar to Jack the Ripper, have like 80% going for them. They're like, oh yeah, that's him. It sounds just like him. It looks just like him. He was, around that time. He knew about aviation or whatever. But at the same time, his eye color was different, or that he spoke with a very thick accent in his life, or that he was in a different country around that time, or just so there's always something that makes you go like, oh, it's probably not him.
Alibi.
Then. Yeah, there's something that always stops you from going, oh, it must be him. So it is really interesting that there's no one that you can pin down and go, it has to be him, or it's very likely to be him. And most of them are dead now. So, yeah, thank you very much for listening. Like I say, just a little fun one that we thought would be nice.
Very different to our usual
Very
episodes.
different to the heavy... I mean, we did do Jack the Ripper, which in a way was quite similar, mystery type story. But, yeah, it is very different to
Not
the
so
kind
much
of...
a mystery, though,
as just a horrible story.
Yeah, terrible injustice
but
against
we did talk about the evidence and stuff like that. But no, compared to the Vietnam War, it's miles different. So I hope you enjoyed it. You know,
I did.
Something that's
fresh change of pace.
Nice. Well, yeah. Thank you very much, guys, for watching. Thank you again to Crate for sponsoring this.
Pint-Sized 15, Pint-Sized 15, Pint-Sized 15.
Pint-Sized 15, and we'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.